All right, thank you very much and good morning, and thank you all for choosing us over Seth. So, I really want to embody the principles of the 10-year anniversary of Latitude59, which is really purpose and inclusion. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little bit of purpose. So if I can kindly ask you to repeat after me, I will ask hard questions, all right? Dude, that's not exciting enough. Come on. I will ask hard questions, because you have to, because no one else will. And then, well, I've just included you in this conversation, so I think we're a little bit inclusive. No, but really, I'd like to get to know you a little bit more. So first and foremost, who here is coming from a startup? Raise hands. All right, investor? All right, you know who to pitch. All of the above, like corporate, government, organization, NGO. All right, oh wow, so we've got a very nice representation in the room. And to further shatter stereotypes or reinforce stereotypes about health tech, who here is born after the year 2000? Raise your hand. Yeah, exactly. This is, so how are we being new and innovative? No, but health tech is hard, and that's what we want to talk about today. So without further ado, I will like to bring up my fellow panelists today. So Helena Binetskaya, please come up. And yes, thank you. And sit wherever you like in one of these two chairs. And then Dr. Mazin Gadir, please. So yeah. Oh, I don't like sitting, but it's, they say sitting is as bad as smoking and eating hamburgers or something if you do it too much. So I'd like to ask Helena and Mazin to please introduce themselves, because I don't want to mince words or miss nuances. A little bit about who they are, and then we'll get into the topic of why they're in health tech and not something else. So Helena, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Helena. I'm from Belarus, but I now reside in Estonia. I'm a first-time founder of a medical device startup that emerged out of my personal story. My baby daughter was 5 months old when she started coughing badly, and I brought her to a clinic multiple times, worried that it could be pneumonia. Well, it turns out she was fine. It was a cold. Her lungs sounded clear. But that experience led to the creation of LungPass. It is a digital stethoscope for lungs. It helps non-specialists detect abnormal sounds in the lungs that are typical for dangerous lung conditions. And so 4 years later, and 2 million in funding later, to which Joseph also has his own contribution, we have brought LungPass to over 1,600 customers. So
that's awesome. All right, and Dr. Mazin?
Sure. Mazin Gadir. So first of all, it's my first time in Latitude, born in 1978. First time in Estonia. I reside at the moment in the UAE. I've been living in the UAE for almost, in Dubai and Abu Dhabi for the last 40 plus years. Thanks to Latitude, thanks to health founders and a number of great people who have actually made me make a commitment and come here. I come from a healthcare digital background. My background is mostly in engineering, quantum electronics, nanotechnology, where I studied in the UK. I've been in healthcare representing governments, corporations, and I've started feeling young and getting into the startup ecosystem. I feel my genes are regenerating once I'm in a community of great people with a lot of innovation. I've been working with regulators like the Dubai Health Authority and Abu Dhabi Department of Health, a number of other ministries as well in the region. I do my postdoc in value-based care, digital health in the USA. And I also do a lot of volunteering as well, which is, again, something of a passion to me. I'm originally from Sudan, a son of an immigrant, and moved to the UAE back in the 1970s. That's me in a nutshell.
That's fantastic. So I note that neither of you started your journeys in healthcare. And Helena, you skipped a few steps because we know nothing about you. We know about your product, but we know nothing about you.
Yeah.
So what gave you the crazy idea to get and start a health tech company, and not just a health tech company, one that's hardware, and hardware has the word hard in it. And if any of you, actually I'm curious, how many of you are doing hardware? Raise your hand. God help you. So like, who are you?
Yeah. Right. What gave me the kind of urge to start? Obviously, that whole situation, but also that I was absolutely naive and I did not know about the challenges of starting a medical device company, let alone, the hardware. So I do not come from healthcare background, nor from the hardware background. I graduated from University of London LSE with Information Systems Management. I've been in quality assurance in software, so it's completely unrelated to the healthcare space, but it was the merge of the personal experience and I guess the drive to make the change, because I didn't jump from the problem to the solution immediately, but I first looked for a solution already, the one that would exist, like another digital stethoscope where I could record my child's lung sounds at home and send them over to the doctors. But they were really pricey at 200, 400 euros, and I could not afford that. And I thought that maybe I am the one to actually change that. So, we got together with our co-founders, technical people and business people, although none of us are from healthcare, none of us are from hardware. So it is a bit of a surprise that we're actually here, certified the device in multiple territories, run multiple clinical studies, and actually brought it to market. It was persistence, a lot of naivety, luck.
Sometimes a few people helping along the way.
Loads of people helping along the way.
Capital and introductions
yes.
to manufacturers.
Yeah,
and other
yeah,
stuff.
that helped a bit.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And Mazin, how about yourself? You said quantum electronics,
That's right.
which sounds a lot more akin to what Elon Musk would be looking for in a candidate as opposed to someone who got into healthcare. What was your defining moment that said, "Hey, I'm gonna, look at people's health"?
So I think at that time I was desperate to look for a job.
Oh, okay.
So coming out with a permanent head damage, that's what PhD stands for. In the UK, I was in a job fair in Leeds University, and I'm like, okay, what am I gonna do now? I haven't yet looked at my career. Where should I go? And then I found this company called Cerner that does electronic medical records, and that just boosted me into healthcare. It's a physicist who moved into healthcare, or a quantum physicist who moved into healthcare, means a lot. When quantum physics is not enough, you need to go into healthcare. That means a lot. But the beauty of what mentioned by Helena is the fact that now we're talking about experiences. And again, human complexity and behaviors in healthcare is completely, I think, undiscovered. It's a wealth of opportunities, as the president say of Estonia. There's so much gaps in healthcare, so much new knowledge and innovation that are coming from the newbies, the millennials and whatnot. But what got me into healthcare is just the fact that I needed, first of all, there was so much complexity in it. There's so much need and process improvement and automation that is required. Worked in the UK, France, and then when I moved to the Middle East, back again, it's just, it's an industry that everybody describes it as lagging behind. Aviation is flying away, retail is going crazy. What has been disrupted now, automobility and autonomous vehicles. And look at healthcare, they're still faxing claims in the US. It's pathetic. I mean, pathetic in the sense that we need to break through, and the young energies that are coming through the talent now. And I've just heard the starting opening ceremony. It's just very empowering to see how much energy is this in the startup communities.
Yeah.
And if I can add to that, I mean, the experience bit, especially when you look at the net promoter score charts across the industries, you will see that healthcare is indeed in low 30s, which is not terribly bad, but it is still way behind health tech, e-commerce, retail. And there are very clear gaps also in the research and in the actual medicine and the drug development process. And we see startups growing that address this maybe underrepresented communities in the medicine, specifically focusing on women's health, on the health of people of color. And there are loads of gaps that affect billions of people and that kind of urge to be fixed.
Yeah. So that is the beauty of healthcare, in that it is a wicked problem. It's not just one problem, it's a set of a million problems. Now, I can see the lure for more analytical minds. You were in computer information systems, physics, this big, hairy, multifaceted, impossible to define and fix problem, but it can also suck you in and keep you there for your whole life. Question I have for you is, out of this massive hair tangle of healthcare as a problem, what was the most non-obvious challenge that you faced? I mean, there's the obvious challenge: regulatory, convincing doctors to change their behaviors, convincing payers to, reimburse your product, especially when it's early, and the whole difficulty of how do I, as a startup, work with a large entity when I have no track record, and I'm always counting, my runway in minutes as opposed to years, and they're counting their negotiation cycles in years instead of minutes. So what is the most non-obvious thing that you encountered in your journey which frustrated you? And I'll start with Mazin as well, and then Helena second, to reverse the order a bit.
Sure. So again, I didn't realize how much resistance there is, right? Change management and adoption in the clinical community is one of the biggest, I think, unobvious or non-obvious headaches, because everybody is, for example, at the moment, we're hyper-legislating in Dubai or in the UAE. We're doing a lot. There's hyper-legislation. There's huge conferences that are happening, marketplace for health tech. Hint, Arab Health in end of January. I don't get any commission for advertising. But
we have a booth there too.
Exactly. But what is always forgotten is the human behavior, the adoption of the clinicians. I mean, the burnout is something that has creeped in to become number 2 worst enemy of healthcare in the US after opioid addiction a few years ago. Nobody's thought about the clinical adoption issue, the lack of talent, which is, again, these issues that are related to people seems to be non-obvious because everybody's running, as you said, quick legislation, lack of legislation, let's automate this, or let's try to fix this, focus on processes and systems, and then forgetting the people. That's maybe my short answer.
Helena?
To expand on the very same point, but from the patient's perspective, what I found surprising when I was visiting the European Respiratory Congress, and it's a huge conference on respiratory, the largest one in Europe, and there was one of the largest kind of panels and keynotes on how to make patients actually take the life-saving drugs that have proven effective, but you kind of need to take them 2 times a day, every day, and that's a nuisance apparently, and that decreases your lifespan and decreases your quality of life. It has been proven in multiple randomized clinical trials, but then still patients do not do that. And even though it's going to save and improve their life. So how can you make it even better? What better value proposition than higher quality value of life and longer life can you give? And even that can be not enough. So that's...
Yeah, I read a similar statistic once that about, the drug adherence rate for taking, tamoxifen in breast cancer patients is something like 50%. And that is staggering. I mean, how can you have cancer, you will die if you don't take your medicine, and you still don't because it's inconvenient. It's incredible. So it sounds like the limitation is not so much in the tech, but rather in the human processes. And how have you overcome some of these process challenges? How have you changed the psychology of patients and physicians? I mean, physicians, I don't know when the last time you went to a doctor and how much time they spent with you, but it's usually measured on one hand in minutes as opposed to, what you actually need, because health is complicated. How have you overcome this? How have you tried and failed to overcome this?
I can focus on the clinicians part,
Yeah.
and then I'll let Helen also share her thoughts, if I may. How many of you here are actually clinically attached? You have some sort of clinical attachment. If you just put your hand up.
Yeah. So are you a doctor or nurse or?
Nurse or any sort of an admin or, okay. So very few, very good. So I think one of the main answers to how to overcome this, I think empathy and listening. I mean, physicians, clinicians are critical and to the healthcare system, and COVID has proven that any economy will depend on healthcare, and healthcare depends on the service providers. There's no doubt about how important those core service providers are. However, how do you transform a human transformation? And that's a very good point you mentioned. How do you enable human transformation within the clinical setting? Again, do you use automation? There is a lot of new generation millennials who are coming through the clinical education, much more technology savvy. How do you utilize them to create champions? Do you look at apps and startups in that area for physician burnout, mental health empowerment? Because that sector of your workforce is so critical to your survivability and sustainability of your economy, regardless to what industry you do. How do you cater for them? What sort of startup or apps do you actually bring in to try and minimize the burnout, cater for the mental health, try to drive adoption? And I think listening and empathy, involving them into the decision making, into the startup. If you're gonna start an application, I've seen a lot of great startups that have involved advisory boards with clinical representation, just to give that. So the key word is listening and empathy, and how you can, if you're a technical person like me, an engineer, how do you actually cater for that ego to try and build some recognition to the great work that they've done, but at the same time, take the fluff and the noise out.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll just interject really quickly. I've come across, look, I've looked at over 2,000 healthcare startups in the past 7 years, and probably over 3,000. And there's a lot of folks that have clinical advisors on their slides, but just have them for decoration. You know, please do use them. Please make sure you understand their pain points, their workflows and everything, because, you know, change starts with the human.
From our experience, and I'm going to just share a very exact specific case. When we just launched LungPass onto the market, it is, you know, it's been the first digital stethoscope for lungs for home use. And people do not know automatically how to use it. They do not read the manuals. And so we created a sort of a tutorial that would guide the person that received the device on how to learn how to use it. And as part of the tutorial, we're going to give the analysis of what kind of, like, whether they made the high quality record or whether they made the low quality record. And it was working, but not too well. They were still, a lot of the records that patients were making at home by themselves were kind of subpar on the quality. What we changed is, instead of giving them the correct AI analysis, we would ask them to use their own ears to listen to their record, compare that to exemplary record, and make the decision on their own if their record is a high enough quality. And surprisingly, they became a lot more strict to themselves, right? Rather than just relying on what AI tells them, they would say, okay, no, it's not really as good as the exemplary one. And as the result of this change, they would start producing much higher quality records. So it just, instead of giving them the answer straight away, you integrate them in the process of decision making, and they improve.
Oh, that's cool. So I don't want to be the one asking all the questions all the time, and I do want to, you know, give the audience an opportunity. So who's got a really hard question for Helena and Mazin, or one of them? Who's got, like, maybe not a so hard question, but just a question that they want to understand a little bit more about? Come on, who's going to be brave? Hi, right there. And maybe you can introduce yourself really quickly, like name, startup, that sort of thing. And do we have microphones running around? Is there anyone with a microphone floating around for questions? All right, I can repeat your question if I don't hear it.
My name is Max. I'm from a startup space. And
There we go. Thank you very much. Aita.
And I have a question, like when you talk about we show empathy to the physicians, right, that they start adapting our solutions and our inventions. That's great, and I agree with you, it works, but it's absolutely not scalable. How do you make this scalable?
To me, okay. So that's a very good question. And again, it's a very good observation that, yes, it's not scalable. However, you are able, I mean, what we can do is, what we've done, for example, in some of the transformation programs, you profile them. And normally you start with the early adopters. There must be in your community of clinicians, either the millennials of them or the tech savvy or the purpose driven. And that's why I think I love the title of Latitude59, Purpose and Inclusion. So if you are able to segment your stakeholders, specifically your physicians, to try and start with early adopters and look at some of the behaviors that you can leverage in order to drive that inclusion. Use those champions. And again, one of the things that I've learned in my Cerner days, they always start with something called train the trainer or bring in your super users. I never understood that concept until I was in the hospital to try and, because everybody, you assume that everybody, resistance curve will always start with early adopters, majority, it goes all the way to late laggers, let's say. So how are you able to use that behavioral curve to try to identify and leverage their influence, their actual peer-to-peer pressure to try and drive adoption? You still have to go into the psyche of it. Yes, empathy is important, but again, you probably need to do profiling, segmentation, be a psychologist in a way to try and understand how they can help you serve a purpose. Sometimes also simplicity, the way you design your apps or your for example, you said telemedicine in cardiac setting. And again, cardiologists are very super niche specialists. Sometimes we come with an ego that needs to be catered for. And again, it might mean that you lower your ego in order to feel some of that, to try and see how you can leverage and convert. And again, it's a chess board game. Absolutely not scalable, but it has to be personalized. I completely agree. Yeah. It cannot be a volume focus. It has to be value, personalized. Take them one by one, literally like a Game of Thrones.
Yeah. So what's really interesting about what Mazin just said is sometimes it's non-obvious, and it depends on the specialty in the health system as well. So I know one great example in the Philippines where they found, so you know the grandmother test, where if you can pitch your idea to your grandmother and they understand it, then it's simple enough. So they found the oldest, crustiest, most published and respected oncologists and try to convert them first. Because if they can do that, they can do everyone.
That's right.
So they started with a really hard problem and turning it on its head. Helena, anything to add? Or
No.
All right, next question. Who wants to ask another question? And guys, let's make it harder. All right, and all right, there's one over there. Microphone. All right, shout.
Okay, there is no microphone.
So who are you and what do you do?
Exactly, I have like a more general question.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Hello.
Hi.
So I have like more...
So what's your name?
My name is David.
Yeah, hi David.
Yeah, from Ukraine. Have a more general question about European healthcare government. For example, as I see, I've read a lot like about Dubai healthcare, how it works, For example, in Ukraine, we also have some direction in telemedicine. For healthcare, we can book, I don't know, some prescriptions from doctor. Yeah. How do you see, as from your professional point of view, how European government can move to more digital direction? How do you think about this?
Okay. So the question was
How can European governments move to a more digital direction?
Yeah, because as we see, Tallinn is moving to the digitalizing, for example, telemedicine for digitalizing healthcare at all. Yeah, but Europe has more conservative standards that's not changes? How do you see how it will change, and from your point of view?
Ooh.
That's a very good question. Look, I mean, I can give you, in the Middle East, we have the stick to change, not the carrot, right? So back again to the question of Max. How do you change behaviors? We use the stick more than the carrot in the Middle East, right? The big boss says, do it, everybody does it. But again, in Europe is an interesting aspect. I worked for the NHS for almost 3.5 years, trying to digitize. And sometimes you have to spread your bets. If you gamble, you spread your bets. You try a number of avenues. Again, I'm not very familiar with, for example, the parliamentary process. How do you wait for regulators to catch up? Because always regulation will lag. How do you start changing from the bottom up to influence regulation? GDPR, I've heard so many people talk about it. We did a benchmark on GDPR when we did the UAE healthcare ICT data law. Very rigid. But again, but safety comes first. How do you actually influence some leniency to try and maneuver some economy of scale when it comes to technology and innovation in the GDPR framework? That's a very good question. I don't know. But I would suggest it's the lobby. How do you actually start lobbying from the bottom up? And I think the beauty of having a democracy and an autonomous way of legislating allows you to actually gather support, just like any election where you actually gather the momentum from the bottom up. Simplicity could help in the way that you pitch your issue. Quickness of adoption could help. The way you can actually gather crowd and gather momentum might help. But again, it's a Pandora box. I'll have to sit and think with you a lot.
Yeah. Well, the challenge is Europe is not one Europe. Europe is a hodgepodge of different nations with different systems, different pathway dependencies and priorities. I don't know, Helen, do you have any examples that you could share?
Well, I can, not so much on the examples, but when we're talking about improving the speed of innovation in medical devices, particularly or digital health in Europe, we're talking about this relatively recent change from MDD to MDR, right? That's a regulation that governs how medical devices or digital health solutions gain access to the market and can be commercialized. So when that switch happened a year ago, it significantly decreased the speed of innovation because the barrier to entry has increased. The regulation has become much more strict. And I know that multiple startups have, including ourselves, have reprioritized the commercialization path from Europe to US. And now US FDA, which used to be kind of the hard beast to tackle, has become the priority for many innovators coming from this region. So that's a bit of a downside.
And I think Helena has struck a gold mine there. COVID has shown us that there is a space for deregulation to allow speed of innovation. So do we need to wait for the next crisis to actually deregulate more to allow speed of innovation? That's a fantastic point. So again, it's a matter of hitting it from different angles, from the bottom up, from the up bottom, from the sideways, to try and get the fact that speed of innovation, the higher it is, the more economies of scale, the more opportunities, the more cash flow, the less recession.
Also, quite a few scale-ups, if we take the US example, they start with direct-to-consumer model, which certainly requires a lot more capital because you have to advertise direct. But then you gather the evidence that is required by the payers and you take that evidence to them with the hope that after several years of negotiation, they will reimburse you. But it is a viable solution provided that you can access capital.
Yeah.
Loads of it.
Cool. So I see the clock has 22 seconds. So unfortunately, we're out of time, but we have an opportunity to find Helena and Mazin until the end of the week, and hopefully you can approach them privately if you have any further questions, or of course myself as well. So thank you very much for your time and attention today. Next time, harder questions. These are easy questions. Let's do harder questions then. But thank you for our panelists.